So let's get right into it. There was an article that dropped on Search Engine Journal that's titled "Why Scaled AI Content Fails." So there's a couple things that I want to go over in this with you, Matt, because I think there's some good points in here. Because we hear this a lot, right? We have agency owners all the time asking, "Well, how do we completely automate our content strategy and create a ton of content at scale?" Well, I don't really think that's the best strategy right now. And this article brings up some really good points. So I want to go over a few points. We'll discuss them. But at the very beginning of this article, it says, when generative AI made mass content production cheap, many brands thought they had discovered a content cheat code. The playbook seemed simple: spin up thousands of highly targeted pages overnight, vacuum up search traffic, and watch organic revenue climb. So it says instead, a quiet crisis is playing out across enterprise SEO. Aggressive programmatic AI initiatives are stalling, collapsing, or triggering manual penalties. This isn't happening because Google hates AI content. It happens because these initiatives break the foundational mechanics of Google's crawl ecosystem, indexing thresholds, and quality controls. Mass programmatic AI content fails when it treats search optimization as a simple checklist rather than a resource management problem. So,
Yeah, I think it all comes down to like the AI revolution made content production easy. And we were at the forefront of this. I've talked about this a lot where we used to primarily write a lot of content. You know, we've always been a part of content marketing for businesses, but we used to be really, really good at, sourcing uh, humans to do the writing, right? And then AI came out. So we were kind of at the forefront of seeing this happen where businesses saw that, AI content production was just cheap and it felt like a cheat code, just like it said. It was almost overnight. People were like, "Oh, I can make content that reads better than I can write it in 5 seconds," And so people turned to that really quickly, and then what happened is they started to scale it, right? Because with SEO, that's always been a thing, right? If you could get more content assets out there, the faster you can grow, the more keywords you can rank for, the more traffic, leads, and sales ultimately that you can get, right? That was the thinking. So if AI can mass produce the content, we can expand our business and our exposure and our audience through, basically just abusing this and having the AI make thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. But the issue is, and I keep seeing this from a lot of big names in the industry. Edward Sturm has highlighted this. A lot of these big journals have as well, SEO, industry journals. But basically, there were these companies that took advantage of that wave and they built a ton of fake content, not fake, sorry, low quality, cheap content with AI that had no additional value and just scaled it. And they saw their websites at first take off, and then over time, they've not even over time, sometimes overnight, they would crash. Like as soon as, Google caught up to kind of what they were doing, there were manual penalties. And then what we're going to get into next, Greg, there's also just a limit to Google's infrastructure and how they
yeah,
can
so
crawl.
let's talk about why that happens, right? Why does that crash actually happen? And so in this article, I like how he lays it out here. He says the most dangerous assumption in programmatic SEO is that publishing a page guarantees Google will evaluate it. Google does not have infinite computing power. Crawling, rendering, and indexing the web costs massive amounts of energy and data center resources. Google uses resource allocation models to manage this. When a site suddenly introduces hundreds or thousands of new URLs, Google does not automatically expand its budget to accommodate them. It evaluates the site based on three primary elements. So let's talk about these really quick, Matt. The first one is perceived inventory. So the total volume of URLs Google believes exists on your site versus what it actually deems useful. Every website has tons of URLs, but not all of the URLs are deemed useful, right? I mean, there's a lot of categories. There's just a lot of kind of garbage URLs that exist in a website ecosystem that Google does not need to index, you know what I mean, or serve up to a user. But it's taking it even one step further, right, with these other two lenses. The next one is demand. How much users and Google actually care about the topics you are publishing. And then URL and domain popularity or stillness, the baseline authority and link equity your site possesses to justify the processing cost, not the same as third-party tool metrics. So, what do you get from that?
Yeah. Well, number one, I do think it's really important for anyone doing digital marketing to understand that Google doesn't just automatically, index every single page. But what's funny is it used to feel that way. Maybe it used to feel that way because we always tried to put out high quality content. So it always got indexed. But I do think the mass influx of content through AI has limited that crawl index, the crawl budget that they have even more. Like it's becoming more prevalent. I felt like even I've noticed on our own website, there's more times where it's harder to get a page indexed than ever before. It almost was automatic, but it's not that way anymore. So it's good, number one, to understand that, because that can help drive decisions on the type of content that you create and the investment that you make in your content. But yeah, I think those three things are really important. I think the first one, Greg, is the biggest: perceived inventory. This is where AI content at scale, I think, hurts you. If you have thousands and thousands of pages on your site and they all look basically the same because you used AI to create them, Google's going to quickly deem most of your website as not being useful. And that's where those crashes have happened on those sites, right? There's so many pages, they all look the same. Google deems nothing there is useful except maybe the first iteration of the page, and it kills it. We see this a lot with local businesses that even at a smaller scale where they try to build, location pages for all the locations that they, offer their services to, and they just make 20 pages for 20 cities and they just swap out the single city name but keep the rest of the page the same. Basically, I probably most of the time those pages aren't even being indexed anymore because there's no value. They look all the same as the very first one that you put out. So it can hurt at a small scale, even at as much as it can at a large scale. But of course, those large scale ones are the ones that see the huge drop because Google basically just looks at their site and says, I don't see anything good here. The other two are interesting though, and they're a little bit frustrating. Demand. Yeah, I guess if there's not demand for it, it's hard to know when that kicks in. You know what I mean? We've seen this too, where like we know there's demand. We use keyword research tools, to target content, but sometimes we just still don't get a page indexed. I don't think that's because of demand all the time. Obviously, I think it could be one, but I don't know how you would necessarily
I think though
pull that out.
with demand, it's very user focused, right? Because like it says, I make a million pages, Google grabs them initially, puts them in the index, but if they're not getting clicked, if they're not getting user engagement, it quickly removes them from the index, right? That's why you see that
Yeah,
big spike
that's true.
and that spike down. Here's the problem though, is that Google's kind of fighting against you in this sense because you could put out a fantastic piece of content. If it's informational, it's a zero-click search anyway because AI overview is going to cannibalize whatever you said in that article. And if the
Yeah.
person doesn't really like it or click into it, is Google using any time spent reading the AI overview as quote unquote demand? Like we don't really know. It's kind of it's not very transparent,
It's not.
and
Yeah.
Google's always been that way, and that's always been a frustration
Yeah.
for SEOs like us because you can write really good content and there's nothing more frustrating when you actually do put out a high quality piece of content that has expertise in it to be indexed initially and then not be included in the index afterwards.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you hit the nail on the head. And I think the third one is in that same vein, like your URL popularity. I think it's funny they say it's not the same as third party tool authority metrics like authority score, but it is. It's whatever Google's version of that
Well, I
is.
mean,
They're all like
they
similar.
used to have PageRank, but they removed that from
Yeah, you're right.
showing it to us. But it's still,
It's
it
the
definitely is
same.
still a metric that they're using in weighing who should be shown. So yeah,
Yeah, and
that
that's
is
kind of
funny that they say that.
it is, and it's like counterintuitive because you have to use good content to build, more site authority. So if you're already at a disadvantage because you don't have site authority, so none of your new content gets indexed. You know what I mean? That feels like a sad cycle. But I think it really leads to probably the next two parts on this article, Greg. Like the first one, it talks about staleness and decay. I do think this happens, and what it means by this is as content gets older, it becomes stale, right? The information is no longer relevant or as relevant, and if there's newer content that comes out, it's just going to be deemed more relevant for today. And AI search models, they use this, right? We've tested this, we've seen this, Greg, taking a blog that used to rank and just even updating that one and putting a new publish date, we can get that thing to rank again because it's, just out of the gate, the publish date alone, the AI models see this as being more relevant. But it kind of, and then the very last one, Greg, too, with the quality over box tick. I'm going way down. I guess we can kind of get to the meat of this, like what this means is it really comes down to this. Okay. So many companies have been abusing AI content at scale that if you can take the time to, and I'm not saying don't use AI, like AI is not the issue. The issue is using AI to replace, strategy and expertise and things that make content provide actual real value. So there
And I,
are
and I
ways.
kind of love how they summaried that in the article, right? In this paragraph. This one says right here, it says, the failure of mass programmatic AI initiatives is not a failure of technology, it is a failure of philosophy. It happens when teams treat SEO as a rigid checklist and assume that if a page has a title tag, an H1, and 800 words of coherent AI text, it deserves to rank.
Yeah,
That is how a lot of people
that's
view
good.
SEO.
Oh, it is. And just like you kind of brought up, we get a lot of people that come to us and they're looking for a shortcut. Like, how can I find programmatic AI that I just basically press a button and it runs AI for me all month? Like, please don't do that. Like you might as well just not do anything. Like, why even waste your time doing that? Like, if you're interested at all, find the mix where you can use AI to help take away the busy work, but learn real strategy. In the end, it's marketing. SEO has kind of come back into the fold of all digital marketing versus being kind of this own standalone thing that it used to be. But what is good marketing? How do you get seen? How do you get cited? Digital PR, getting mentioned, getting reviewed by other websites, like all those things are what matter. You need to get your name out there. And so, if you care about your company, you care about how you're perceived, you should take some time to think about your content strategy. What should your content have in it to reflect what people can expect from your business? Does that make sense? Like if it's just cheap, scaled, 1,800 word AI articles, well, maybe your business isn't worth as much as you thought it was, right? Let's put some time and investment in putting out good content that reflects back on your company well. And that's what Google's picking up. That's what I mean. Google's rewarding that sort of thing now, which I do love that change. So there's not as much of gaming the system through a lot of little technical SEO tweaks. It's really come back to like, do you have good content and are you building a good brand?
I think it's really important to understand because so many SEOs over the last 2 to 3 years have just been, sad about the fact that most website traffic is just crashing, right? And it's because of this exact thing, right? The crawl budget, all that stuff is very, very small. They have to be much smarter about where they put that crawl budget. So they're really trying to determine what is high quality. So I do believe a lot of SEOs have operated over the last 10, 15 years as a check the box sort of thing, right? I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and I get this result. That is changing. And I think that now it's just a reallocation of time and effort. Instead of all the time and effort that you spent checking the boxes, while some of that still does matter when it comes to some of the technical things, like making sure that you have an H1, you have a keyword, you have a link potentially, some of that. Where you really need to spend your time is how do I add the expertise or how do I add the marketing angle for this brand to help it to stand out from all of the just basic, regurgitated garbage that exists online. And instead of creating more regurgitated garbage at scale, stop doing that. That's not going to work. It's already very, proven with data that Google and AI search systems are not rewarding that. And even if they are, it's just like the black hat tactics that we've seen in SEO over the last 15 years with article spinners and all that kind of stuff, backlinks, black hat links. It might work for a little while, but you run the risk of that day when it all comes crashing down and all that time and effort that you spent was completely a waste of time. And then how do you explain that to your clients when everything drops?
Yeah, you're right. We've been in the industry long enough. We have seen so many of those rise and fall, these black hat tactics. It looks like a shortcut, right? It looks sexy. People want to hop on. People don't have a ton of time, right? So anything that saves them time and can potentially get it done for them looks really attractive. But you're right. Every single time Google makes a change and squashes that. So I totally agree, Greg. Honestly, the best mix of this is using AI as a resource, as a tool to help you create a really good product. And that's exactly why we have our SEO Digital Marketing Academy on School. I'm sure we'll include a link in the description below. We basically show small business owners and agency owners how to use AI tools to help them create real content assets that rank and are indexed and compound over time. So we have step-by-step courses, whether you're a beginner. We also have more of advanced courses if you're an agency and you want to kind of get into why and how to create content long-term. It becomes an asset. So if you want to learn more about how to do SEO and use AI responsibly to help you create real content assets that perform over time, come join us in our SEO community. We'll include the link in the description below, and we'll see you over there.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us today, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.